Heard from my PSA. I'm anxious to see what that is. All the other tests turned out fine. I think it's supposed to be recorded.
Even your head test?
He'll come up with good.
Why I want to take a week to address this issue that you might, most of you, as I have noticed, as I have noticed, is you accept what happens without a lot of questions. And I want to be able, and I want to address today, and probably maybe next week, maybe not, then I'll get back on the topic that we were on. Winston said last week in one of his sermons that statistics show from several reports that in overall churches, when I say overall churches, I'm not talking about Baptist churches only, I'm talking about all churches.
Yeah. Right.
That 75% of the membership is not saved.
That's true.
That could be or could not be true, obviously, I don't know. But that seems to be the statistic. 75% of membership don't go to church anyway, it seems like. And there are a lot of unchurched people who are not in church. And not only that, I think that most of us, even in our Baptist churches in particular, especially in independent Baptist churches, charismatic churches, and other kind of churches, there is a tendency to emphasize evangelism and soul winning. I was in a church in Hammond, Indiana, where on an average Sunday, 100 to 200 people, quote, were saved, and on a given Sunday, over 140 were baptized. And so the question that I want to ask and deal with this morning is why we at our church do not give a altar call, as it were, or an invitation for salvation. May I state up front that at any time, anybody who wants to and feels need to go up and pray, obviously that's great.
That's right.
I mean, if you sense the Spirit moving in your heart and life and you feel that it would help you to do that, don't ever feel that I would say no to that. Obviously not. My desire today is to help you understand why I do not give an appeal, an immediate appeal, or an immediate decision for a person to be saved. Why do I do that? What is the reason for that? What are some of the things that we need to discuss with that? I want to talk about the psychology of altar calls. I would like to talk about invitations. I'd like to talk about what does the Bible say about altar calls. And the question is, are altar calls biblical? And I want to address that. Why I don't make an appeal for immediate decisions. May I say to you that I have done that probably from the time I was 16 years old to the time I was, from 1963 to 1980. That was a normal thing for me to do. I made appeal for people to come to the altar and make immediate decisions. And the church was, and it was designed to get people to make a decision. And I did that since from 1963 to 1980 or 82. So I've done that. I've been through that. I've seen hundreds, perhaps, who have walked down a sawdust trail in my father's ministry. I've seen hundreds. When I was saved, and when Winston and I were saved, Dad's church ran 300 to 400 to 500. And I've seen in a revival where hundreds went to the altar. And the Sunday that I was saved, November of 1954, there were at least, as far as my memory is concerned, 50 or 60 that were at the altar that Sunday. So I'm saying there, on occasions, it does occur, it does happen, and most of us probably were saved walking the sawdust trail, or we were saved based on an appeal that someone gave us, and we made it. And I'm saying is there's a right way of doing it and there's a wrong way of doing it. But I want to share with you, it is my job as a pastor, and I'm accountable for this church. And if I want to make sure that every one of you are saved, I'm not assuming you're saved. I want to know that you're saved.
Right.
And that's my objective. If someone doing that. So, what are your thoughts on giving a salvation invitation at the end of the service? And I'm talking about giving a call for salvation. That's what I'm talking about. And there are means whereby I want anybody who comes to our church, that if they're led by the Spirit to be saved, I want to give them an opportunity to do that. And I want to help you understand I want to give you this week or next week, to give you the history of the invitation, because it was not done in the New Testament. It wasn't done in the first century. It's only been a new phenomenon in the last 100 years. At the end of almost every Pentecostal, charismatic, or evangelistic church service, there is this ever-present call for sinners to give their lives to God, quote. Generally, there is a fever pitch, a pleading, mixed with a healthy dose of threats of eternal hellfire and damnation. I was raised that way. All in the tune of a Hammond organ that has been plucked to within an inch of its life at a high pitch to get people emotional to make a decision. Unfortunately, altar calls have become synonymous with salvation, and particularly because they seem to ask us to surrender one's life to Christ. How often, after a message that I preached, especially when I was asked to preach evangelistic service to a bunch of teenagers, my goal was how many young people I could get to come to the altar at the end of the service. Especially at youth camp, I wanted to see how many people I could get them to throw a stick in the fire to surrender their life to Christ. And then sometimes I would tell my friends, watch this, at the end of the service, I'll have 82% of people coming to the altar. And that was a game that I really believed that, but I can share with you, I've done that. I was rather good at doing that, but I've learned that it was not good. And when I was at First Baptist Church, I quit baptizing anybody under 12 years old, and because I had baptized so many young people and so many children that I felt that I was doing them a disservice. And when I realized that you're not going to lose a person because they don't get baptized. If a person doesn't get baptized until they understand what baptism is, they're not going to go to hell. And I figured it was better when you ask anybody, are they saved, they'll say, well, I got baptized. So they associate salvation with baptism.
Right.
What does the Bible what does the Bible say about an altar calls? Are altar calls biblical?
Yeah.
The practice of altar calls call people forward after an evangelistic sermon to make a public profession of faith in Christ. In other words, we will say, if you've been saved tonight, you need to make a public profession of faith and come forward. If I've said that once, I've said that a dozen times. If I have gone to the plan of salvation in a church, if I've been out that week and I've been visiting when I used to go soul winning and someone would be saved, and I said, now remember now, you've got to come to church on Sunday, and after I get finished preaching, I want you to come forward and make a public profession of faith that you've been saved this Tuesday night. If I've said that once, I've said that a dozen times, and 50% of the time, those people never showed up for church.
All right.
So my comment is, I began to look at that. What have I done? Was that person saved, or was that not person saved? So, and that gained prominence, especially in the Billy Graham crusade. All of us have heard dozens of times Billy Graham at the end of the service get up and say, now wherever you sit, wherever you're sitting, I want you to stand up right now. When George Beverly Shea, who is 103, saved, I want you to come to the service. When the music plays, I want you to make your way out of the aisles, come down and stand down in front and so forth. So that became very popular. It is also known as the invitation system. Altar calls are regularly practiced as part of some church service, especially in our Baptist denominations. Of course, in other evangelical churches. As a matter of fact, your son, your brother, was at the altar when he died. While altar calls are practiced today, they are not found in the Bible. Their advocates cite. So you say, well, what does people use as being biblical? Look with me, if you will, to Matthew 4, verse 19. Matthew 4:19, as well as Matthew 9:9. They will cite these passages to support the use of altar calls or mourner benches or whatever they're called and give an invitation. First, Christ called each of his disciples publicly. He told them, "Follow me," and expected them to respond immediately, which they did. And Jesus was demanding an outward, this is their point of view. They say Jesus was demanding an outward identification with himself on the part of those who would be his disciples. Of course, the problem was that there was one who made an immediate decision that made a wrong decision.
Amen.
And that was Judas, right? Matthew, you have that, Janet, Matthew 4:4. Matthew 4:19.
And he said unto them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men."
I pushed the button. Let me go back. I like that and go to verse. All right, and Lois, you have Lois 9, Matthew 9:9. Matthew 9:9. So, of course, the problem of Judas, who also responded publicly by leaving the life behind and following Jesus, is that the call Judas responded to was not synonymous with salvation. So the call that Jesus gave the disciples was not for salvation, because Jesus called Judas knowing that he was not going to be saved. Matthew 9:9.
And as Jesus passed forth from thence, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the receipt of custom, and he said unto him, "Follow me." And he arose and followed him.
So so people use those two verses in particular to say Jesus called and he said make an immediate response. So when we're preaching a sermon, at the end of the sermon, we're saying we better get them to make a response right now.